Thank you to this 37th meeting of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. As expected, we will start the first hour of our meeting with two witnesses who are here with us today. From the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, there is Madam Mary Dawson. You have 10 minutes to give your presentation about the main estimates, obviously. And then we have Madame Suzanne Legault, who's from the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada. You will also have 10 minutes to do your presentation on the main estimates. And committee members will be able to ask questions of these witnesses until 4:30. So that is how we will proceed for the first hour. Thank you for being with us today. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Ms. Dawson for 10 minutes of presentation. Thank you. Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee, it is a pleasure to appear before you this afternoon as you consider the main estimates, my office's budgetary submission for the 2015-2016 main estimates. I thank the committee for inviting me. Accompanying me are Lynn Robinson-Dalpé, who is the Director of Advisory and Compliance, and Denise Benoit, who is the Director of Corporate Management.
In July 2007, with a mandate to apply the Conflict of Interest Act for public office holders and the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons. These two regimes seek to prevent conflicts from arising between the public duties of elected and appointed officials on the one hand and private interests on the other. The Act applies to over 2,400 public office holders, and the Members' Code applies to all 308 elected members of Parliament. Ministers and parliamentary secretaries are subject to both regimes. My office supports me in fulfilling my mandate. It includes advising public office holders and members on how to comply with the Act and the Members' Code, receiving and reviewing their confidential disclosures, maintaining confidential files on these disclosures, making some information public in the public registry that my office maintains for the Act and for the Members' Code, administering an administrative monetary penalty regime under the Act, and investigating alleged contraventions of the two regimes. In its first 5 years, my office maintained an operating budget of $7.1 million. I felt this amount would be sufficient once my office was fully operational. We have had surpluses each year that can be attributed to my reserve, vacant positions, and cost-saving practices. I reduced the non-salary portion of my operating budget by a total of 3% over the past 2 fiscal years. Although that reduction was partially offset by an increase in my salary envelope to cover economic increases, I was able to proactively offer an overall budget reduction of 1.4% in 2013-14 and again in 2014-15. Savings were achieved by centralizing some functions, such as printing and procurement, and by reducing the amount set aside as a reserve. I've determined that I can accomplish my current mandate in 2015-16 with planned expenditures of $6.95 million for my office. This is up slightly from the $6.94 million approved in last year's main estimates, because of a small adjustment to the employee benefit plans, where contributions have increased from 16.5% to 16.8%, as determined by the Treasury Board. I note, however, that any amendments resulting from the reviews of the Act and the Members' Code could have resource implications for my office. Finally, I expect that an adjustment to the salary envelope will become necessary next year to compensate for economic increases that have been absorbed by my budget over the last few years. I do not plan to request an increase in my overall budget, but rather an adjustment between the salary and the non-salary envelopes. Over the last 8 years, I have built a solid internal management framework. It's based on the principles of sound resource management followed in the public service, even though, as an entity of Parliament, my office is not subject to most Treasury Board policies and guidelines. This framework is supported by transparency, annual financial statements, quarterly financial reports, and status reports on travel, conference, and hospitality expenses are posted on my office website. And since 2010-11, our annual financial statements have been audited by an independent auditor. My office uses external partners to provide expertise in the area of information technology and security, accounts payable and financial reporting, and compensation through shared services agreements. This provides greater efficiency and adds one more level of scrutiny in the management of resources. Given the nature of my mandate, salaries represent our largest budgetary expenditure. Non-salary expenditures are mostly related to the cost of shared service agreements and the standard costs of running an office. Measures implemented internally to reduce spending continue to produce expected results. My office continues to spend less than its allocated budget, in part because of these measures, but also because we have explored new management structures and have decided not to fill vacant positions immediately. I maintain a reserve to cover unexpected operational pressures, such as an increase in investigation activities. I also use it to fund special projects and initiatives internally. My primary goal as Commissioner continues to be to help public office holders and members meet their obligations under the Act and the Members' Code. The focus is reflected in the size of my office's Advisory and Compliance Division, which is the largest of the 5 divisions and accounts for over 1/3 of my staff. Our advisors help members and public office holders comply with the Members' Code and the Act. This is done in part through formal mechanisms set out in the 2 regimes, such as the initial compliance process, the annual review process, and the requirement to disclose material changes. Members are also required to disclose sponsored travel and gifts that have a value of $500 or more, and reporting public office holders are required to disclose gifts with a value of $200 or more. In addition to these formal mechanisms, advisors provide information and confidential advice on an ongoing basis to individual members and public office holders, and in some instances to their organizations as a whole. In 2014-15, my office had over 4,000 communications with individuals who were subject to the Act or the Members' Code. This volume is expected to increase this year as a result of the upcoming election. While the major focus of my office is on prevention, I also investigate possible contraventions of the Act and the Members' Code. In 2014-15, it was a typically busy year in terms of investigative activity. My office dealt with 45 investigation files, including 6 that were opened during the previous fiscal year. Some of those files resulted from formal requests from members of the House of Commons or referrals from the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner. Others were initiated by myself as a result of information that came to my attention in other ways, such as media reports and communications from the general public. We closed the majority of those files without proceeding to an examination under the Act or an inquiry under the Members' Code or issuing a public report. 5 files resulted in the release of public reports, all of them under the Act this year. 8 investigation files were carried over into the current fiscal year, and we have since closed 2 of them. Last month, after 12 months of work by my staff in collaboration with the House of Commons, my office launched a new public registry of public declarations. We previously maintained separate registries under the Act and the Members' Code. The new registry combines the 2, making it possible for visitors to more quickly and easily access information. The registry's launch was the first component of a 2-phase initiative. The second phase will give members and reporting public office holders access to a portal system that will enable them to file their public declarations electronically. Le commissariat compte actuellement 4 postes vacants.
4 positions are currently vacant at our office, and staffing processes are either underway or will be launched shortly for 3 of these 4 positions. While employee turnover remains low, I expect some departures in the coming year, including some as a result of planned retirements. This concludes my opening statement. Again, I thank the committee for inviting me to discuss the budgetary requirements of my office. I will be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Without any further ado, I will give the floor to Madame Suzanne Legault, who is the Information Commissioner of Canada. You have 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting me to discuss the main estimates given to the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada. The budget for operating costs in 2015-2016 is roughly $11.3 million, which includes the employee social benefits. I currently have 93 employees who help me fulfill my mandate. As always, I spend as many resources as possible on programs while maintaining sufficient levels of internal services to ensure proper governance within the Office of the Commissioner.
Organization. And in addition, year after year, my office receives unqualified opinions from the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. In 2014-2015, the office received 1,749 new complaints, and we completed 1,605 investigations. Since 2012-13, we have seen an increase of about 10% in complaints overall, with a spike of 30% between 12-13 and 13-14. At the beginning of this year, our inventory of files is standing at 2,233. During my last appearances before this committee, I raised concerns with my organization's budget and the risks that the current funding level had on my ability to carry out my mandate and to face contingencies. I've also pursued all available channels within government to seek and obtain additional funding. The most immediate impact of our financial situation has been longer wait times for complainants. There is currently an overall delay of about 5 months before a file gets assigned to an investigator. For the more serious complaints, the refusal complaints alone, which comprise of about 87% of my inventory, the delay before I can assign a file is about 7 months. This situation will continue and is only getting worse as no new source of funds was granted to my office through the most recent budget exercise. Toutefois, je suis déterminée à continuer.
However, I am determined to continue to protect as much as possible the rights of access to information despite these circumstances in order to increase efficiency and create more discipline, predictability, and clarity in the complaint process. Both with my team and I will continue to lead investigations.
Of excellence we value and to uphold Canadians' information rights to the best of our ability and our capacity. Given the quasi-constitutional status of the right of access, Mr. President, anything less would be unacceptable. And with that, I'm prepared to answer your questions.
Merci, Madame la Commissaire, pour cette présentation.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner, for your presentation. So I will allow committee members to ask questions. Some of you want to ask a number of questions. We have until 4:30, so let's start with Mr. Martin. You have 7 minutes.
Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses here today. I want to start at the outset by saying what a rare pleasure it is to have these officers of Parliament here presenting before a parliamentary committee, because it's a rare and a wondrous thing, in my view, in my recent experience, given the efforts we've gone to have annual reports, etc., dealt with by parliamentary committees. We have very little time, and we have 7 minutes for questions and answers. I'd like you to consider this as if you were playing Reach for the Top, and this was the short snappers segment of the TV program. First of all, to Madame Legault, does your office have adequate funding to meet its responsibilities?
No.
Can you confirm that since 1911, when the government achieved its majority and ended the advisory panel for providing independent oversight for your funding has been reduced by 11%?
Correct.
Can you confirm that for 2 years straight you have requested additional funding from the government and that government's response has been to further cut your budget?
The cuts were announced government-wide, but yes, I have requested and received no additional funding.
And can you confirm, though, that for 2 years you went to the president of the Treasury Board and said the following, he said the following, I am committed to work with the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada so it has the resources to fulfill its role should the Information Commissioner put forward a submission for funds, which implies you did not apply for funding. Can you correct this seeming contradiction?
Well, this is, somewhat internal to government workings, but we are being advised by the Treasury Board Secretariat to put forward our requests for funding through the budget exercise, which is first goes through Treasury Board Secretariat analysts, then is referred to the Department of Finance, and then we have to wait whether or not there is an item in the budget allocating additional resources to our office, and should that be in the budget, then we are advised that we can make a Treasury Board submission. We have been ready to make a Treasury Board submission and been working with Treasury Board Secretariat for the last 2 years. Otherwise, we have followed all of the processes that the Treasury Board Secretariat has told us to follow.
Do you believe it's disingenuous on the part of the President of the Treasury Board to imply that you have not requested additional funding to be able to fulfill your mandate?
Well, the truth is we have followed all the appropriate lines in order to seek and obtain this funding. Whether that's disingenuous of the President of the Treasury Board, I think you would have to ask that question of Minister Clement.
If we can ever get him before a parliamentary committee, we will do just that, Ms. Legault. The government has a history of being tough on watchdogs. In fact, budgets have gone down. Those who hold them accountable seem to be either punished by budgets or worse. Linda Keane, Peter Tinsley, Paul Kennedy, Pat Stogren, Munir Sheikh, Kevin Page, Howard Sapers. I mean, in looking back at this, have you spoken to other parliamentary agents and oversight commissioners about the funding to your budgets recently? And were you signatory to a letter signed by 7 agents of Parliament to Parliament recently in the last few years asking for independence of your budget setting process?
There were letters written some years ago in relation to the advisory panel. I'd have to really see which letter you're referring to, but that would be some time ago in terms of the advisory panel.
I'm going to move on to the Budget Implementation Act, directly related to the estimates we're dealing with here. Do you believe that the RCMP has broken the law in the matter of the gun registry records?
What I have done in the special report to Parliament is advise Parliament that I have made findings with the RCMP and Minister Blaney. So I've asked first Minister Blaney to process additional records that I believe are responsive to the request of the complainant. That recommendation was rejected. I have also recommended that the remaining records, which deal with the Quebec registry, which is a static copy of the remaining records, be preserved. I have received assurances by Minister Blaney that that was going to be done.
Do you believe, Madame Legault, that there has been political interference in this case where the RCMP may have broken the law?
What I have done is I have referred the matter to the Attorney General of Canada for an investigation as to whether or not there was a breach of Section 67.1 of the Access to Information Act.
You wouldn't have referred this to the Attorney General if you didn't have reason to believe that there was such a violation of that clause of the Act.
I do have evidence that the records were destroyed. I do have letters that have been sent that ask for assurances that the records would be preserved. I did not investigate whether this was done with a clear intent under Section 67.1 to deny the rights of access.
What do you think of the retroactive changes in the Budget Implementation Act regarding your powers, and do you see this as a dangerous precedent?
Yes, I have said so very publicly. The retroactive application of the provisions of the Ending the Long Gone Registry Act actually go back, the retroactivity go back to October of 2011, even before the Ending the Long Gone Registry Act was in effect, and it nullifies the request of the complainant in this case. It nullifies all of my investigation. It nullifies all of the use of the formal powers and the documents that we've obtained through that. It nullifies the application we made to the federal court, and it nullifies any potential administrative, civil, or criminal liability of any of the actors involved.
Do you believe it offends the rule of natural justice and the rule of law to contemplate passing legislation that affects people retroactively? Could we not do the same thing with the Mike Duffy affair and make it okay to give a sitting senator a $90,000 check?
I think that this retroactive application and the retroactive stripping of the application of the Access to Information Act is a perilous precedent. I think it could be used in any other file, of course. It could be used in any of our further investigations. And we are pursuing all avenues possible. And you have to understand this was just tabled on May 7, and these are complex matters. And we are looking into whether or not this raises issues with relations to the rights of access, and whether it raises issues, constitutional issues under Section 2B of the Charter, and whether it raises constitutional issues with the rule of law.
Thank you, Madame Legault. Now I'll give the floor to Madame Davidson for 7 minutes as well.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to both of you for being here and for your colleagues, Madame Dawson, for them coming along. It's good to see you all again. I do have a few questions on the, excuse me, on the estimates, which I believe you're here to answer today. First of all, thanks very much for your overview that you gave us, Madame Dawson. It was certainly very informative. And I note that you say in your first 5 years you had the operating budget of $7.1 million, and that you have reduced the non-salary portion by 3% over the past 2 fiscal years. So I think that's remarkable that you've been able to do that and continue on with the work that you've been doing. Now, you said that you've been able to do that by centralizing some of your functions, and you mentioned printing and procurement. You also talked about reducing the amount that you set aside as a reserve. Can you tell me what your numbers were prior to the reductions and what they might be down to now?
I think they were around 600,000, Denise, am I right there?
Exactly, and it's now down to close to $500,000, but it's been reduced. That's the reserve took the biggest chunk of the cut that we made to the budget.
And what was the purpose of those reserves? When or where, why would they be used?
Yeah, we established them when the new office was established, because we had no idea what kind of activity we'd have on the investigations fronts in particular. And generally over the first few years, well, it took a year or two to even kind of get organized to start the investigative exercise, but once it started, it did increase significantly over the next few years. It's kind of leveled off now, but that's what the main purpose of it was. We really did not know what would be entailed in the investigations.
And you feel that things have leveled out and that you do have a better handle on what might be expected or what may happen?
At the moment, it seems to have leveled off some. Yeah.
Okay.
If I may add,
sure.
But just one piece of information. We also use the reserve to fund the development of new applications. The Commissioner made a reference earlier in her opening remarks about the new public registry that was released at the beginning of April, and that was funded mostly out of the reserve, because without the reserve, we wouldn't be able to invest in that kind of application development.
Okay. Now you talk about transparency within your organization. And certainly we all know that that's extremely important, and you talk about your status reports on different things. You also say since 2010-11, the annual financial statements have been audited by an independent auditor. So how is that different than other organizations within the government structure? And what happened before 2010-11?
Before 2010-11, we did not have an independent auditor. We determined in the first few years to have one because we wanted to be allow people to be as certain as possible that we were doing a good job with our money. I really don't know enough about comparing it to the others, but Denise can perhaps add something.
If I remember well from my years in the public service, the Auditor General usually will audit the financial statements, and in our case, because of our status, we actually went out and we're using Ernst & Young to do it. But they're using the same accounting principles, and so they're certified just like any other, or verified like any other financial statements that would be done within the public service. So,
and I guess it's the feeling by your organization then that the independent auditor gives you that other extra arm's length. Is that the reasoning?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. How many employees do you have? You said that you are managing excuse me, the non-office or the non-investigative portion of it by cutting back on some of the other costs. And then you say that salaries represent your largest budgetary expenditure, and you do not always fill every position as it becomes vacant. I think you referred later on in your opening remarks that you have 4 that perhaps aren't filled at this time, if I heard you correctly. How many employees do you have, and what is your long-term plan then for filling those positions? We have
49 positions, and I believe there's 45 on strength at the moment. We're kind of in a let's see how we can make do with what we've got space at the moment. But a lot of the absences, like usually we have a maternity leave or 2 each year, and that's still a budgetary charge. We are using part-time, like 1-year terms and things sometimes to fill in behind those people. We're increasingly trying to establish pools. We're not sure what's going to happen after the election, of course, and even if nothing unusual happens, there's always quite a bit more work right after an election with new people in and with new staff for people. So, but it's uncertain. There's an uncertainty there as to just what we will face in the fall. What else? I'm not sure what else. Okay. I'm sure there's other things.
Yeah. Maybe I can ask you a bit about the investigation files. You said that there were 45 that you've dealt with during the past fiscal year.
Yes.
6 were opened during that time, and then I think you said that how many? 8 were carried over, and 2 of them have been closed since. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what the normal number or usual number is in a yearly basis, and how this compares to it, and with the number of files that have been closed and those that are still undergoing investigation?
Well, usually there's a number of investigations going on at the same time, and they take varying lengths of time to complete. What we found this past year was that as the year began, we had quite a few investigations that had been going on for more than a year or 2, and so we were determined to get those ones closed down, and so we actually managed to close down 5 of them. Not all of them were carried over, but I think that's approximately the numbers that we're having of investigations. Now, there's not a huge difference. The lowest one was in 2010-11, and there was 39 files opened. You have to distinguish, and the highest was in 2012-13, which was 48, and this year it's 45. So we're within the same ballpark generally. You have to distinguish the files opened and the files that we actually initiated an examination. And of course, the 49 are all the files opened, which is why so many are closed, because we look into them and see whether there's any merit. Sometimes it's from getting a request, and sometimes it's something I've seen or come to my attention from the general public. And so we're very careful, though. Any information that comes in, we consider it carefully to determine whether indeed there is anything that should be investigated. So there's many more files that are opened and closed than there are examinations begun.
Thank you. Merci. Je vais devoir vous arrêter.
Thank you. I hate to interrupt you, but Mr. Sims has the floor now. You have 7 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
First time here in front of, well, you, not the entire crew, but I just for Madame Legault, just for a quick, just for my own information here, from 2013-2014 expenditures, the statutory spending goes from 358 up to over 1 million in 2014-2015, and by the same token, the program expenditures change. What is that supposed to be?
Can you tell me what you're looking at?
Oh, I'm talking about the main estimates, budgetary voted.
What page?
Actually, here. One moment.
Oh, this is a document that was prepared by the Library of Parliament.
Yes,
it's
it
not
is.
the main estimates.
Okay, but I just wanted you to explain, see the expenditures between the budgetary voting as well as the non-budgetary voting.
You're looking at the 13-14 numbers?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, the 13-14, I mean, I don't know these numbers. These numbers are not familiar to me, so I don't know where
Okay.
they come from.
Well,
But I can explain to you the difference in the amounts between 13-14, 14-15. There's a significant decrease, and that's because in 13-14 we moved,
yes, okay.
and that's the difference
Okay.
in those numbers, but they're not the main estimates numbers that I can gather.
We've okay, that's fine. We've been here before, obviously. We've been talking about the terrible strain is on your office and able to function with all the information coming in and so on and so forth, and your ability to do that. And there are other jurisdictions, you know, around the world that seem to be current in the way they deal with information. You spoke about that quite a bit. In the Budget Implementation Act, obviously there's nothing available for you to be up to par, we'll say, in what it is you hope to do. One of the policies that I've always believed in is open by default, and but it seems to be very difficult here because of the lack of funds that you're receiving and resources. Is that correct?
Well, those are two things. The funding of my office, I mean, it's just a reality. There are 2,300 files. The budget is 11 million, including employee benefits. Just do a bit of a comparative exercise, the number of files that we have to deal with. That's the issue with the budget at the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada. We're not talking about 50 files, we're talking about 2,300 files, and more are coming in every year in the same amount. So that's the reality of the OIC. That's what happens in terms of protecting Canadians' rights of access. Open by default is really something that has to be embedded in government policy, whereby the government would take the approach that they would foster an open by default type of exercise, and that has a lot of ramifications. It has ramifications in terms of when you create documents. Do you create them with principles of access by design, for instance, which was developed by my colleague in Ontario, where when you create your document, you're mindful, particularly with databases, you're mindful of the personal information that's embedded in those databases and things like that. So that's a different issue from the budget of my office.
When you approached the Treasury Board, what was the reaction that they had to what you just explained about how it is difficult given the resources that you have?
Well, everybody at the Treasury Board Secretariat that has looked at our numbers agrees that we cannot even if we were superwoman and we had 90 super people, which we do, but they cannot be more super than they are now. And there's just so many files people can close. That's the bottom line, and everybody's really quite aware of it. And we have done all of the resource allocations. We have done all of the efficiencies looking. We have imparted all services we can. We go and beg all the time for people to lend us services and share their services. We do that all the time. So we have done all of this exercise. We have done all the efficiency. We can maybe muster a bit more in terms of efficiencies, but it's not going to allow us to close 2,000 files.
Thank you, ma'am. We could have this conversation all day, but I have other guests here too. But Ms. Dawson, would it be correct to say that you've had 149 since 2007, 149 confidential rulings?
I'm not sure what, that's the number, that would be the number of files that I did not pursue into an examination. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I was just trying to the fact that there have been private rulings on matters as pertaining to members of Parliament or public office holders in general.
Oh, gee. Well, I mean, we get requests for advice every day.
Okay.
And I said there's 4,000 of them. So I'm not sure.
How many violations have you had since 2007?
Oh, we got those numbers, but there's sort of in the order of perhaps between 20 and 30, I think, that we found. Do you have those numbers there?
It depends if we're looking at monetary penalties.
Monetary
Or
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about investigations. You're talking about monetary.
No, I'm talking about monetary penalties.
Oh. It took us a few years, as I was saying, with respect to the investigations, to get that up and running because there hadn't been such thing when my office was first established. But we have had, how many? Have you got them, Lynn, there?
I've got them, yes. It's 27, 30, 39, about 39 violations.
The funding of the registry that was started in April. Now, you said earlier about the amount of money that was required to do that. How much money was required to do that?
The total investment was $240,000.
Okay, and you said that you had to go to a reserve?
We use our internal reserve because from within the budget that the commissioner gets every year, there's an amount that is set aside for that type of investment. So we actually were able to fund it internally, but from this pot or reserve that we set aside every year.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Your time is up. So I'll turn the floor to Mr. Maguire for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, as well. And so I just have some questions. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentations. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to be on this committee, and I welcome everyone here today, and thank you for your presentations. I just had some queries as I heard your presentations, and I had a few questions that I'd like to ask Ms. Dawson as well. And it comes from some of the things that my colleague Ms. Davidson started out asking in regards to the number of staff that you have and some of those areas as well. You're looking at, I believe, under the advisory and compliance area, about a third of your that's the largest division, and it's about a third of the staff. Is it 15, 16, 20 people?
It's closer to 20 than 15. It's 17. Okay, it's closer to 15 than 20.
Okay. Thank you. I just wondered what the division was like in regards to that. And so your other 4 areas are named here as well, and there's proportionately smaller numbers in each of those. Right. I assume this is the largest one, as you say. Yes. And you've indicated that your advisors, that you have a number of advisors as well that provide you with information. And can you just give me some background on what an advisor is? Or
yes, it's not me they're providing the information to. They're advisors are the people that the members or the public office holders phone or consult with, at least at the first instance, to ask questions. Or, as well, they also deal with the annual reports or the initial reports. So they're the face, the initial face with the public office holders or the members.
Yeah, thank you. And so you have a process for receiving requests, I'm assuming. Can you just outline that as well?
This is requests for advice?
For information, from your information, for people that are seeking formal help through the information office.
Yeah. Well, it can come in many ways. It can come in by email, it can come in by letter, or it can come in by phone call. And each advisor is designated a certain number of public office holders and or members. So each of those people under the Act or the Code have a specific advisor. So that they develop a familiarity with each other. So, for clarity, that's when an issue comes forward, that there's an advisor will take a hold of each of those areas and work with people in regards to. It's not so much the issue; it's the individual. Like the individual. They're responsible for a particular individual. Okay. And so, is your role then? And I see it here as one of the areas that you mentioned that you perhaps will keep track of the media and those areas and look at picking up ideas on your own to see if they need to be requested in? Is that what I interpreted? Well, or I mean, we certainly watch the media when it has anything to do with our mandate, and if we see something, like there have been a number of investigations that I've launched on the basis of information that I discovered on the media. So yes, but more of them than come in from the media, come in from private citizens. There's always been this discussion about whether private citizens should be allowed to request an investigation. Effectively, the way my office operates, it doesn't really matter whether they have that right or not, because if anything comes in, we look into it. Unless it's nutty, but I mean, most of them are not nutty. Well, some of them are, but.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to ask what the definition of nutty is or what kind of differences there may be, but I just wondered if you saw your role then more as a watchdog in some of those areas, or to deal with the formal complaints that might be coming forward from the individuals. And any individual in Canada, I assume, has that right to be able to bring something forward.
I see my role as if I become aware in any way of the Act appearing not to be followed or the Code, then I should follow up and see what's going on.
Thanks. I guess I wanted to just look at the number. You're saying that your office has over 4,000 communications as well.
The media and individual, yeah. Sorry.
In that area, can you just expand on that for me a bit?
4,000 are really for communications with public office holders and members of the House of Commons. Again, in there, I'm talking about communications generally. Some of these communications have a number of communications, so there can be a lot of back and forth, but I didn't go into all the details with regards to that. The statistic is communication with an individual. It can be on an annual review, and that takes a longer time, a number of communications in that specific component, so I didn't go into those details.
Okay, and back to the information management and information technology, the launch of the first component of the two initiatives, and of course the launch was your first. Can you just expand on the registry's launch as being the first component of the two-part phase that you're developing?
The objective there was to make it easier for somebody who wanted to go in and find out information about an individual who was under both the Act and the Code. The way up until the beginning of this fiscal year, the way it worked was that you had to look under a Code registry and under an Act registry, so we put them together so that you can get in and just deal with them all in one shot. And the second phase is going to be opening up the possibility of people working directly with our machine, our computers, with putting reports in or
through the portal system.
Yeah, the portal.
So, and that's how is that? Is it set up? It's running.
It's just on its way. We're working on that, and that will be launched later this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Later this year or at the end of the year? Later this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
September.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You have 20 seconds left.
That's fine.
Quick questions. So now, Madame Bog, for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. My first question is for Ms. Legault. I'd like a follow-up on the questions asked by my colleague on C-59 and the former long gun registry. And then I would like more information about the report that you tabled, and then we talk about it a bit more. Am I correct in saying that the office that handles information requests should be independent of the minister's office? The minister is the person who is responsible under the Access to Information Act. It's he or she is at the head of the institution unless there are specific situations. For example, like at our office, I am the one who is responsible, and those powers are delegated within each institution in differently. But is the interference of the minister something that would be acceptable, or should it never have happened? There's no interference of the minister in my report. I asked for reassurances from Minister Taves to protect the documents, and the documents we were told that they would be protected, but they were not, and that is what is in the report. Thank you. Now, you came to this same committee to ask for more funding at the end of last fiscal year. That was something that was not accepted, and now we see in C-59 that you say so that there has been a change in your powers that is retroactive. Does that represent a threat to your mandate and to your responsibility as the commissioner? I think the first consequence is the most important one of C-59. It retroactively eliminates the rights of a requester under the Access to Information Act. It retroactively eliminates all of the investigation that my office undertook and all of the evidence found. It will retroactively eliminate the requester's rights to ask the federal court to submit a request to the federal court, and it retroactively removes any responsibility, any potential civilian or criminal responsibility. With respect to my mandate, it's not the most important thing, but it does harm Canadians' access to information and their rights to request accountability from their government to make the government accountable for its actions. That is the result of C-59, and I consider that very serious. Do you think it's constitutional? I think there are certainly arguments to be made. We are exploring the issue. As you can imagine, these are very complicated matters. Thank you. What are your next steps that you will be taking? You said that you will be transmitting the document to the to the Auditor General's office. Do you have any other steps that you'll be taking? We referred the document to the Attorney General of Canada, which is set out in our legislation. After that, I learned in the newspapers that the file was referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions, and then I learned in the newspapers that apparently it was referred to the Ontario Provincial Police. Those are news for me. I was not aware of this. I learned about it in the newspapers. Is it true or not? I have no idea. The next steps will be carried out in the courts, I believe. And obviously, if Bill C-59 becomes law, the police investigation, which has started, will not continue because it will be based on something that no longer exists retroactively. So the next steps, in my opinion, rest with MPs, first of all, because Bill C-59 will be referred to committee and it will become a parliamentary responsibility in the House. And on our side, we will proceed with all of the recourse available to us to protect the rights of requesters. Thank you. How much time do I have left? Thank you very much. You have no more time left. There is time for another round of 5-minute questions. Mr. Deckert, you have 5 minutes.
Chair, and thank you to our guests for being here today. Ms. Dawson, I'd like to begin with you. One of your objectives is to ensure that the public is well informed about your work. I wonder if you could give us some information on your plans for achieving this goal over the next year.
I consider my annual reports very important. I think my annual reports are quite a bit more fulsome than many you might see, and so I try to be very honest and full about what my office is doing. I also have guidelines that I put on the website. My investigation reports, I believe as well, are also information giving vehicles. So everything that my office does, I try to be as transparent as I possibly can and as informative as I possibly can.
I assume your annual report is on the website, available to all Canadians?
Each year, and the other one will be out in a couple of weeks.
Very good, excellent.
Yeah.
Ms. Legault, maybe you could tell us about the plans of your office to make the public more aware of the functions of your office.
We are very limited in terms of awareness development because I do not have an education mandate, as you know. We are restricted in how we can communicate on our investigations through our annual report and through special reports to Parliament. We do have, a website. We do put as much information as we can on that. And aside from that, we produce very few publications year over year, aside from these special reports and the annual report.
Okay. Ms. Legault, are there organizations or individuals that file large numbers of complaints about access to information requests?
There are some, in terms of requesters or in terms of
in terms of requesters, are there, you mentioned that you have an inventory of 2,233 complaints. Are they from 2,233
no.
Specific or different individuals or organizations, or are there some organizations or individuals that file a number of these things?
It varies. There are some requesters that file more requests over the system, and some complainants that file more complaints.
Right.
We have 3 big groupings in terms of cases: special delegation files, which deal with national security and international relations. That's a big grouping, about 350. And we have a big grouping
So
with...
the international relations requests, are they from foreign nationals or from Canadian citizens?
You have to be a resident of Canada in order to make an access request. And then the other grouping is really the Canada Revenue Agency.
Okay, and those would be for individual cases, I would assume.
And a lot of law firms, involved in those types of complaints. In terms of the system overall, you have to understand that about half of the total number of requests in the system go to the Citizenship and Immigration Canada. So those really deal mostly with people who are outside of the country wanting to have information about their status with Citizenship and Immigration. Right. Those usually tend to be represented by people here. So it's about 30,000 requests in the system that go through that. So you have to, that gives a sense of where the bulk of the requests across the system. And aside from that, there are about 25 institutions out of the 250 that receive over 90% of all the requests. So the main departments: Transport Canada, PCO, Treasury Board. The Health Canada, Industry Canada, that's where the bulk of the requests go.
Is there any individual organization that's responsible for, say, 10% of the complaints that you review?
There are some you can sense my reluctance here, because obviously complaints are made unanimously. And so our requests and motivations behind requests and complaints are also protected under the law. So I am somewhat reluctant in that answer. But yes, there are people. There are complainants that have more volume of complaints, but it could be because they're journalists, it could be because they're lawyers, it could be because they have a specific interest in a specific area. and their requests would go to different types of institutions. Some complaints are issue-driven. Lac Mégantic, for instance, we had a big surge. Various people requested. It varies from year to year.
I sat on this committee a few years ago, and when we were talking about the information requests, we were told at that time, that was say in 2009, that you know, a particular individual, a particular media organization was responsible at that time for more than 30% of access to information requests. And I just wondered if there was a correlation between, you know, the access to information requests and the complaints file that your office deals with.
I would be very surprised if it was 30% of the requests.
It was at that time, but it may have changed.
I really don't think that's possible. Perhaps the person was talking about the complaints, and that would have been the time around the CBC complaints. And there was a very huge surge the year after CBC became subject to the Act, and the complaints went up significantly that year. I think that's what those comments might refer to.
The CBC was subject to access to information for the first time around that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Monsieur Descartes. C'est tout le temps qu'on avait pour cette première.
That's all the time that we have for this first hour of the meeting. So we will allow the next witnesses to come before us. I would thank you once again for attending today. Thank you for sharing your relevant information with us. I will suspend the meeting for 5 minutes to allow the next two witnesses to take a place at the table. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Toujours à l'ordre pour le comité.
Welcome back. This is the 37th meeting. We are in our second hour. We have two witnesses with us today. We have the the Commissioner of Lobbying, Ms. Karen Shepherd, for 10 minutes. And then we have the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, Mr. Terrien, who is with us as well, and who will be discussing the main estimates 2015-2016. So you both have 10 minutes max for your presentations, and then the members of the committee will have the opportunity to ask you questions up until 5:30. So we will, without further ado, I will give the floor to Ms. Shepherd for 10 minutes. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I am pleased to be here today to discuss the main estimates and outline my priorities for the fiscal year. I am joined by René Leblanc, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Financial Officer.
To maintain a registry of lobbyists, to develop and implement educational programs to foster awareness of the Act, and to ensure compliance with the Lobbying Act and the Lobbyist Code of Conduct. As I have previously said before this committee, I run a lean but effective organization due to the progress made in streamlining operations. Thanks to the hard work and dedication of my staff, who continue to perform despite scarce resources, last year I was able to deliver several new tools for lobbyists, improve compliance in the areas of monthly communication reports, and launch our segregated secure network to enhance data security. In 2013-14, my budget was cut by 5%. I am currently able to deliver on my mandate. However, there are not sufficient funds to implement major system upgrades and policy and program changes which might be required if the Act were to be amended. The 2015-16 main estimates for my office is about $4.5 million, which is essentially the same amount as last year. My salary envelope represents about 63% of my budget. The remaining 37% is for operating costs. I have a complement of 28 employees. The Registry of Lobbyists is the primary tool for lobbyists to disclose their lobbying activities. A budget of about $1 million, including salaries for 7 full-time employees, has been allocated to manage the registry this year. Après la réduction budgétaire de 2013,
Following the budget reduction in 2013-2014, the registry was placed in maintenance mode. However, given the importance of the system, this position is not sustainable in the long term. One of my priorities this year is to develop solutions to ensure the registry continues to be stable in the long run.
Act in the Code, I allocated $1.1 million in 2015-16 to enforcement activities, including the salaries for 8 full-time employees. In addition to conducting reviews and investigations, my office undertakes a broad range of monitoring and compliance verification activities. This year, my priority will be to continue to refine these compliance initiatives. Le dernier volet de mon mandat.
The last component of my mandate is to inform and educate stakeholders. The Lobbying Act is a fairly complex piece of legislation. Outreach is thus essential to ensuring compliance. I allocate $700,000 to outreach activities, including salaries for 7 full-time employees, while developing educational tools and delivering outreach activities will continue. My priority this year will be to support the implementation of a new lobbyist code of conduct.
Is to ensure that lobbying is conducted according to the highest ethical standards. While the Act has been amended several times over the years, the Code has not been amended since it came into effect in 1997. In 2013, I held a consultation to determine whether revisions to the Code were warranted. The consultation indicated that while the Code was working well, there were areas of the Code that could be strengthened. As required by the Act, I consulted stakeholders on a revised code in the fall of 2014. The Act also requires that I submit the code to a committee of the House of Commons, which I recently did. I look forward to hearing the views from members of this committee, as I see this as an important and final stage in the consultation outlined in the Act. Following consideration of your views, I will develop the necessary tools and guidance documents for lobbyists. Finally, I will publish the code in the Canada Gazette. At that time, I will indicate the date when the new code will come into effect. Until that date, the 1997 code remains in force. J'aimerais souligner trois changements.
I would like to highlight 3 key changes to the Lobbyist Code of Conduct, which I submitted to you. First, the scope of the code has been changed to be consistent with that of the Act. The main objective of the Act is to ensure transparency of communications between lobbyists and federal public office holders. As a result, I have removed all rules in the code which dealt with the interactions between lobbyists and their clients. Second, I added a new principle concerning respect for Canada's democratic institutions to reflect the role that lobbyists play in the public policy process.
To clarify the area of conflict of interest. I simplified the rule dealing with conflict of interest to reflect the 2009 Federal Court of Appeal decision, which included the concept of apparent conflicts of interest. I also added new rules which provide additional clarity to lobbyists in the areas of preferential access, political activities, and the provision of gifts. Some relationships between lobbyists and public office holders could create a sense of obligation. For example, when the lobbyist has financial or business dealings with the public office holder, or when they are close personal friends. In such cases, where a relationship would be perceived as giving preferential access, lobbyists should not lobby that public office holder. Some political activities could also create a sense of obligation. While we live in a democratic country where both political activities and lobbying are legitimate, lobbyists must ensure that no real or apparent conflict of interest is created when these two activities intersect. The Code will explicitly prohibit lobbyists from lobbying members of Parliament and ministers when they have carried out political activities that could reasonably be seen to create a sense of obligation. These activities include organizing a fundraising campaign or event, writing speeches, preparing candidates for debates, and serving on the executive of an electoral district association. The rule extends to a prohibition on lobbying public office holders who work in a minister's or MP's office. When certain political activities are carried out by a lobbyist, it is reasonable to think that political staffers who serve at the pleasure of a member or minister may also feel a sense of obligation. By contrast, activities such as donating as per the Elections Canada Act, putting a sign on a lawn, being a member of an electoral district association, or attending fundraising events do not create a sense of obligation that would result in the appearance of a conflict of interest. The final rule concerning conflict of interest prohibits lobbyists from offering a gift to a public office holder, except when such a gift would be a normal expression of courtesy or protocol. Pour conclure, je tiens à dire que
I would like to end by stating that I am very proud of my staff and all of their work and support in achieving my mandate. Thanks to their dedication and professionalism, I am able to look forward to all that we will once again accomplish this coming year. In particular, with their help, I look forward to implementing a new lobbyist code of conduct. Mr. Chair, this concludes my remarks. I welcome any questions you or the members may have. Thank you, Madam Commissioner, for your presentation. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Tallien, who is the Privacy Commissioner. You have up to 10 minutes, Mr. Tallien. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. And I am here with Danielle Nadeau, our Chief Financial Officer, and Patricia Kosem, our General Counsel, to present on the main estimates for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. I will outline our fiscal outlook. I will describe how we are managing rising demands, and I will announce our new privacy priorities, which will influence our work in the future. To begin now, in the coming years, our resources are forecasted to remain at their existing levels. When looking at our 2015-2016 plan report on plans and priorities, there appears to be a drop from the last 2 fiscal years to this one. This difference is due mainly to the expenses incurred in previous years for the mandatory move of our headquarters in February 2014. For the next 3 fiscal years, our resources are set to remain relatively stable at just more than $24 million annually. That said, we face rising demands. We have generally seen increasing levels of complaints while our investigations are becoming more complex. On top of reviewing privacy impact assessments, we are also increasingly requested for consultations to provide advice earlier as new federal initiatives making use of personal information take shape. Meanwhile, data breach reports from departments were already increasing before a new Treasury Board directive came into force a year ago, making material breach reports to us mandatory. And at the end of the last fiscal period, breach reports in the public sector hit a record high for the 5th consecutive year. Facing rising demands, we have taken steps to continue to meet our obligations within our existing resources. For example, we are settling more complaints by early resolution, through which parties are satisfied without the need for a full investigation. We are also managing situations where many complaints come from various people about the same issue by opening one all-encompassing investigation. And we have also implemented measures for situations where one individual submits many complaints to better balance the needs of all complainants, ensuring all Canadians have access to our services. All told, Mr. Chair, we are using most, if not all, of the tools available by our acts to manage rising demands. But today, we are left with precious little room to maneuver to meet our obligations. Today, we are nearly 1 year in after taking on new responsibilities under Canada's anti-spam law. We also anticipate the passing of S4, which will make breach reports from private sector organizations to our office mandatory. Bill C-51 will also create new work for our office as we are called upon to investigate whether its implementation respects the Privacy Act. So while I am not ready to say our office needs new resources today, I think that it will be quite difficult to meet our existing and new responsibilities with our current level of resources. After we have some experience fulfilling our new roles, I may need to appear before you to make the case for an adjustment.
When I appeared before you to discuss my nomination for the position of Privacy Commissioner of Canada, I said that during my mandate, my goal would be to increase the control Canadians have over their personal information. One of my first initiatives after assuming my role was to launch a priority-setting exercise that would guide the discretionary work my office does towards realizing this vision in the most efficient and effective way possible. As part of this exercise, our office engaged representatives from business, government, civil society, and academia. We also held focus groups to gauge the views of the public. And today, I am pleased to share our results. To begin, one of our four privacy priorities will be the economics of personal information. Our discussions highlighted the need for user clarity about the personal information they provide in exchange for online services, how that data is used, and the question of meaningful consent. As a result, some of our key work under this priority will be closely examining the issue of consent in today's digital world, increasingly marked by the emergence of big data and the Internet of Things. The overall goal of this priority will be to enhance the privacy protection and trust of individuals so that they may confidently participate in an innovative digital economy. The body as information will be another privacy priority. Whether it is biometric information tied to a trusted traveler card or that generated by medical devices, genetic testing, or wearable fitness trackers, this data may be used in many ways that could compromise people's privacy. This issue concerned the experts we engaged, and it is one about which we will learn more and raise awareness among both the developers and users about the potential privacy risks of these new technologies. The goal of this priority will be to promote respect for the privacy and integrity of the human body as the vessel of our most intimate personal information. Of course, one of the hallmarks of today's information technology is sharing information with the world in a click. And as the saying goes, the net never forgets, which means youth growing up today may no longer get to outlive their past mistakes. These are among the reasons why reputation and privacy will be one of our priorities, and one under which we will work to help enhance digital literacy among vulnerable populations, while also examining the right to be forgotten. Our goal with this priority will be to help create an environment where individuals may use the Internet to explore their interests and develop as persons without fear that their digital trace will lead to unfair treatment. Fourth and finally, government surveillance will also be among our priorities. As mentioned, we will be directing investigative resources to ensure the Privacy Act is duly respected by the information sharing made possible by Bill C-51. We will also give advice to departments through privacy impact assessments or otherwise to prevent privacy breaches. We will also work with private organizations and government to establish appropriate standards for transparency and accountability reports. Ultimately, our goal with this priority will be to contribute to the adoption and implementation of laws and other measures that demonstrably protect both national security and privacy. In order to make progress on these priorities, we will focus our activities around 5 cross-cutting strategies. First, exploring innovative and technological ways to protect privacy. Second, enhancing accountability and promoting good privacy governance. Third, taking into consideration the fact that privacy knows no borders. Fourth, enhancing our public education role. And fifth, paying special attention to vulnerable groups. In closing, our new privacy priorities will help hone our focus to make best use of our limited resources and further our ability to inform parliamentarians and protect and promote Canadians' privacy rights. Having identified what we believe are the 21st century's most pressing privacy concerns, our office will now chart a course to address them in partnership with individuals, organizations, legislators, and fellow oversight bodies. And with that, I look forward to your questions. Merci.
Merci à vous, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Thank you to you, Mr. Commissioner, for your presentation. I will now give the floor to committee members who likely have a number of questions to ask you. Starts with Ms. Borg for 7 minutes. Yes, thank you. I would like to thank you for being here with us today. We always have many questions to ask, but we have to prioritize them. So I will start with you, Ms. Shepherd. So the government is... There needs to be transparency in government, and that is your job is partly to ensure that this transparency is present. Mike Duffy's trial is currently going on, and it has made the news a lot recently. During the trial, Mr. Duffy's time calendar was made public, and there were many meetings which were not recorded with lobbyists. Do you think that there is a gap in the current legislation and the 20% rule is difficult to apply in these circumstances? The things that I mentioned during the review of the legislation. It depends on what was implemented with respect to the 20% rule. There are perhaps some nuances that are not captured in the legislation. That's maybe one thing, because if the person doesn't need to do initial registration, they don't need to do a monthly report either. Thank you. The other thing that we saw in the Duffy trial was that often the senator himself was reaching out to the meetings and then they didn't need to be registered. Do you think that that's a problem that we should address? In general, for now, lobbyists must make a report if the meeting is organized by the lobbyist, unless there is a financial benefit. In that case, regardless of whether it is the public office holder or the lobbyist, there must be a monthly report. Mr. Duffy organized a number of meetings with Enbridge, and apparently he notified the Prime Minister's office of this. Was your office aware of this contact? Yes. We were updated that there were meetings happening. I always take these allegations seriously, and I would confirm before the committee that I am looking at the activities of the lobbyists to determine whether there is a problem there. Thank you. Okay, I will move over to Mr. Terrien. I have a few questions for you as well. During the last parliamentary session, there were a number of bills directly affecting the privacy of Canadians, and they were studied in committee. There was C-44 and C-51. Unfortunately, you were not invited to appear before us. Does that have a negative impact on your ability to ensure that Canadians' privacy is protected in this legislation? Even though I wasn't called to appear before the House committees, I was called, certainly for C-51, to appear before the Senate committee. And I was able to give presentations to both committees of the committee of both houses. I gave briefs to parliamentarians, and I do that as much as possible. If I'm invited to speak before you, then then we can have a discussion on the changes being made. But that being said, I think in the case of all bills, including C-51, my views were transmitted to parliamentarians. There was public debate on these issues. I am satisfied with the public debate that ensued. And it's better to have as many forms as possible, I would imagine. Now I would like to talk a little bit about S4 that will soon become law. We studied it in committee before second reading. You appeared during that session, and you proposed a number of amendments in Articles 6 and 7 of the bill. They were not accepted, and no changes were made to the current version of the bill. Are you worried about the repercussions that it could have? With respect to S4 on the whole, I think that the bill is a positive step. There are a number of positive measures in general, including a number of new powers under the bill and powers that will be applied more directly. So on the whole, we think that S4 is a good thing. I recommended a number of amendments to the bill. They were not accepted. In particular, with respect to the publication of information from telecommunications companies to police agencies, I would have preferred that those amendments be adopted. That being said, as I indicated in the case of the strategic priorities that we adopted at the office, I intend, since this bill will be implemented, I intend to strongly encourage both public institutions and departments and private companies and telecommunications among them to have transparency reports that will allow the public to know how much these private companies are giving private information to various police agencies. I hope that it will advance the debate, and in the light of that, perhaps some amendments will be made in the future, but I take it for granted that the bill will be adopted as is, and we need to ensure that it is applied as transparently as possible for the good of the public. Thank you, Ms. Borg. Your time is up. So I would give the floor to Ms. Davidson. You have 7 minutes as well.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our presenters here again this afternoon. It's always great to see you back again and hear your views, and we get an opportunity to ask you about the main estimates. So that's a good thing, too. I'm going to start with Mr. Therrien, please. In your opening remarks, you make the comment that we've seen increasing levels of complaints and they've become more complex. Can you expand upon that a little bit, please?
Yes. So in terms of volume, there has been a significant increase in the number of complaints, both under the Privacy Act and under PIPEDA, if we look at a period of several years. In the last year, the increase under the Privacy Act has been less important, so approximately 10%. And under PIPEDA, the private sector legislation, it has been more important. So that's in terms of volume. We try to accommodate and manage this increase in complaints through various measures that I mentioned, including early resolution of complaints rather than fulsome investigations. So we try to look at these complaints in accordance with the complexity of each case. The increase in complexity, if I look at the Privacy Act, for instance, is a function essentially of the fact that in previous years, many years ago, many complaints had to do with access rights, that is, whether individuals about whom the government had information properly were given the information held about them. More recently, there are more and more files or complaints or investigations that have to do with more systemic issues like information sharing practices of departments, for instance, C-51, but also border initiatives, for instance, other initiatives. So we've gone from complaints and studies and investigations that were focused more on individual treatment and now moving to more systemic issues, which of course makes things a bit more complex.
Okay, thank you. You talked about your all-encompassing investigations, and did you find that that's working well? Is it creating any issues for anyone in the system?
I'll give you a bit of a long answer, as short as possible. The worst consequence, I would say, would be that under the Privacy Act regime, the treatment time of complaints is growing because of limited capacity. That said, we have closed more files last year than we received. So the backlog has decreased in the last year, but treatment times have increased to something like 9 months, which we think is too long and we want to address. Under PIPEDA, the number of complaints has risen by roughly 50%, and through a number of means, we have been successful largely in meeting the demand.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question, Ms. Shepherd, now, please, and I might come back to you, Mr. Terrien, if I still have time. Thanks very much for your presentation this afternoon. In all our previous visits when you've been here, we've talked a lot about education, and I see in your opening remarks you're talking about developing and implementing the educational programs to bring awareness of the Act and the Code. How is that going, and what are you doing anything specific that's different, or are you continuing along the same lines you have been?
Well, what's probably different is we've been doing a lot more webinars with first-time registrants on an education front. We're